Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, let's talk about Guntersville. Let's talk about the Toyota Series Championship at Guntersville last week. First off, big congrats to my buddy Seth Davis. He finished in the top 10 and also got the Central Division champion check, so an extra 10 grand for him. 20 grand total. Pretty awesome payday for my buddy and also my neighbor. And also, of course, big congrats to Kyle Hall for a great win. I mean, you know, Live Scope just keeps on trucking, man. Those wins are just piling up with people fishing, you know, the Live Scope or forward-facing sonar and really using it to their advantage. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's just the evolution of the sport, you know, and guys are utilizing those tools to their advantage. And I'm going to be one of those guys that starts really paying more attention to those fish in places that really are more suited for fishing forward-facing sonar in tournaments. You know, because I think a lot of these tournaments are being won on suspended fish that previously we had not been, you know, really targeting because they're very difficult to catch. But with forward-facing sonar, they're becoming way more accessible and viable during a tournament setting. So big congrats to those guys. But let's talk about my tournament at Guntersville, man. It was definitely one of the worst finishes I've ever had. Didn't catch a limit either day. Didn't even get close to catching a limit either day. Caught one fish the first day. Had like, you know, 12 non-keepers, which was pretty frustrating because I hadn't caught that many non-keepers the entire time in practice. And then the second day, only caught 2 keepers and, you know, still had, you know, a bunch of shots. They just weren't eating the top water very well. But in any case, I never really had a shot at a good tournament once the tournament started. And man, I can't remember the last time I fished a tournament and didn't catch a limit one of the first 2 days. You know, all the tournaments that maybe I don't catch a limit one of the days, the next day or the first day, I go out and I catch a limit. So this was kind of a gut check tournament. And the funny thing is that I actually felt like I was fishing pretty well. I wasn't getting spun out. I wasn't getting, you know, I had a lot of confidence, and I wasn't getting too much in a rush, too much in a hurry, and I can't say the same thing for the rest of my 2022 events. You know, I've had some decent events this year, but I've had more bad events this year in 2022 than I've ever had before, and it's been frustrating. But at the same time, I knew during the pro circuit season when I was making those bad choices and piling up some bad finishes at Guntersville. I had a bad tournament at James River. That was a really bad one in the Harris chain. All 3 of those events, I knew in the moment, I'm fishing terrible. I'm making bad decisions. I'm getting too much in a rush. And, you know, it just kind of, you know, came to be that I'd have bad tournaments in those. And I knew it along the way. But this tournament, after practice, I was like, man, I'm going to have a really good shot at doing very well in this tournament. So let's break down practice. I didn't end up getting any footage for this event. I didn't bring my GoPros, or I brought my GoPros, I just didn't have anything to put them on. I forgot my YOLO Tech stick at home, so unfortunately I didn't get any footage, but really there wasn't much footage to be seen anyways, so it all worked out. But going into this tournament, you know, I was really excited about it. I kept on telling people this could be a tournament that I probably have a good chance at being in contention to win, because generally these fall championships that have been held on Guntersville have been won flipping, pitching, punching, and also throwing a frog. Those are all shallow water power fishing tactics that I love to do. I love breaking down, you know, large expanses of grass, and I love, you know, power fishing in that way. So especially punching, if the punching bite was on, I felt really good about it. But getting into to Guntersville and starting practice, I started realizing that both punching and frogging were very off. They were uncharacteristically bad for this time of year. It wasn't the grass that was the problem. The grass looked actually really good. It had, you know, pretty much started to decay and was probably at only about 50 or 40% of what it was a couple months prior at its densest point. And so I was really surprised. I got there, and you know, I fished a lot of stretches up the river near BB Comer. That's a good traditional, you know, fall time area on Guntersville, and I just spent a ton of time punching and also frogging, and really only had a handful of bites every day. Not even a handful of bites, you know, 2 or 3 bites doing either one all day long. So I knew that there was something up with that, and so I ended up trying some other techniques. I started throwing, there was a lot of fish on the main river channel, you know, all throughout the lake, and so instead of, you know, pitching or punching and frogging the grass, the dense grass on the flats next to the river channel, I started casting some baits like a spinnerbait. I started casting a 3/4 ounce Z-Man sling blade spinnerbait, and caught a lot of fish doing that. You know, that sling blade spinnerbait is really good shad imitator, and I got a lot of bites on that. They weren't very big though. I had 1 or 2 like quality bites, but for the most part they were small. So I was pretty much writing that off, because in this championship format I have no points to have to worry about. I don't have to just catch a limit. I want to catch what it takes to win, and I wasn't seeing the size with the spinnerbait. I also tried, you know, some swim baits and things like that. And then I finally ended up picking up a big topwater, a Zara Spook, and also the evergreen shower blows and baits like that, you know, and just covering water, those shallow grass bars with those baits. That is a traditional tactic on the TVA, and I started getting some really good bites. They were hitting it very ferociously. You know, I was bending in the hooks in practice so I wouldn't hook those fish, but even then they would just choke it so bad that they would, you know, I'd have to, you know, sit there for 10 seconds and try to shake them off once I hit it. So they were hitting it really good. The only problem was the first 3 days of practice, it was you know, cloudy, rainy, windy, very different than what the tournament was going to be. And then the last day of practice, when it got sunny, it was calm and sunny that last day. I said, okay, I need to test that topwater bite to make sure that I can catch them under these conditions. And so I went out middle of the day, right before I ended up ending the day, because I got off the water that final day of practice at around 3, and so around 1 o'clock I started throwing that topwater around again with bent-in hooks, and man, it was just crazy. I found several stretches of bank that I could cast that topwater around, and almost immediately get bit by some quality fish. Anywhere from 3 to 1 was like, you know, I don't know what it was, but it was 5 to 7 pounds, something in that range, and was getting quite a few bites. And then finally I was just like, man, well, this will work in the bright sunny conditions that we're going to have during the tournament. So overall I felt pretty good about you know, my chances going into the tournament, and also my strategy. My strategy was keep it simple. Don't run around too much, because, you know, running around you could start getting in a bad rotation, and you might overlook some things. And really just, you know, keep that top water rod in my hand, just covering water with that. And throughout the tournament day, I couldn't imagine not having a mid-teens to upper, you know, teens, or even a 20-pound bag by the end of the day, throwing that top water, as long as the bite still continued with that thing. And so I felt pretty good, man. I was actually really excited for this tournament. So going into the first day, I get out there, and you know, I get to my first stretch, which was a stretch up the river near BB Comer, where I had caught, or I had a big fish bite, you know, that one that was between like 5 and 7, and then another one that was a 3+ pound class, and they were like back to back, and I stopped fishing at that point. So I got there, and it was a spot that I knew that there was a lot of good fish there to begin with, and it was immediately apparent that there was not a morning bite with that top water plug. You know, we had a little bit of a breeze coming out of the north, and I wasn't sure if that was the deal. So I ended up fishing the top water on those stretches, never got a bite. I had one fish, you know, follow it all the way to the boat, and took off as soon as I, you know, was reeling in the top water. But you know, I never got to see it, but I saw the boil. It was a fairly large fish, but I never had any blowups at all. So I started running some other stretches that I had, and never ended up getting a bite. I ended up seeing some fish school, and they would not touch my top water. I think I needed to have a smaller top water on deck to kind of imitate, you know, some smaller bait fish, just in case, you know, that situation arose where, you know, I've got fish that are busting on small threadfin shad, and so you know, I saw a little bit of activity, but I never got really a blow up on my bait. And then I ended up running some more stretches, and finally gave up on the top water bait for a little bit. Went up and started flipping. Ended up catching one non-keeper flipping, and again I hit some of my best stuff and only had that one non-keeper bite. And then the wind died down a little bit, and I was like, okay, maybe this is the window for the top water. So I went back to my best stretches, fished them over again, fished them. I felt pretty good, and still nothing. And so after that, I ended up going to this one bluff bank and started throwing pitching a finesse jig to the bank, and that's when I ended up catching my one keeper for the day, which was 3 pounds and a quarter. And so yeah, from there, I'll be honest, this was the point in the day, the last 2 hours, where I feel like I missed an opportunity and didn't stick with the top water. And you know, this is one thing that I've seen several times this year, is how important timing is and can be in some of these tournaments. And Guntersville in particular, I learned this lesson early on in the season with the Pro Circuit event, where I had a really terrible first day and then flip-flopped my rotation the second day and realized that I had missed that critical window in the morning with my flipping bite. But for this tournament, you know, I ended up kind of trying to run some new water, find some new fish, and do something different. But I probably should have just stuck with the top water for the rest of the day. I mean, I should have just stuck with my plan. So I kind of do regret that last 2 hours of the first day not sticking with it, because it turns out when I got back to the house, I'm staying with you know, two absolute hammers on the TVA, Seth Davis and Kevin Drake, and they both, you know, caught fish on top water, and their big flurry was in the afternoon. So I learned that you know, my big mistake was not sticking with it that first day. So I was pretty bummed after that day, because you know, I felt pretty confident going into that first day, and to come in with only one keeper, kind of a bummer, you know, and it was definitely a humbling experience going to the weigh-in, especially after such a bad season to begin with. To have just another bad day was you know, a little bit of a gut check. So got in, weighed my one fish, and then after that, you know, talked to my buddies and realized that maybe, you know, timing was where I went wrong. So the following day, I decided I'm just going to keep that top water bait in my hand no matter what, all day long. And I was also going to find some new stretches of bank, because I think what had happened is that my stretches up the river, for whatever reason, and it sounds weird, but it does happen a lot, they just died. Those stretches were no good. I didn't find any areas up there that ended up producing very well, and so I was like, man, I need to start fishing some areas kind of mid-lake and find some new stretches. So the first place I ended up stopping the second second day, I started throwing a walking bait first, had one miss it pretty quick, and then ended up picking up a whopper plopper because it was a little bit windier that morning and wanted something that churned a little bit on the surface, and ended up catching my first fish. Thought it was going to be, that was the start of a really good day, and then it was a fairly large lull, so I ended up running some new areas. I ran back up to the river portion of the lake, and retested all of those same areas again, and again nothing. Those were just completely dead throughout the tournament, which blew my mind because I thought they had a ton of potential. The fish were there, and they just didn't want to eat topwater. And then my second fish ended up coming up the river, but in a different area, a new area, and I caught it on a whopper plopper again. So my only two keepers that day came on whopper ploppers, and I kept those topwaters in my hand for the rest of the day. I think I had 4 other blow-ups. None of them really struck me as big fish. All of them seemed like they would be keepers, but none of them were like, oh my gosh, this is a giant. So that's it, man. I think the whole thing was, the whole reason why I did bad in this tournament is because the topwater bite just wasn't on all that great. If you did happen to land on some stretches where the fish were actively feeding, like my buddy Seth, you could catch them. But man, it was a grind throughout the rest of the day, and it wasn't like you were getting a lot of bites. So unfortunately, I just didn't run into that. So I was using a pattern that was dying, and the areas that I had just kind of dried up. So that's what happened at Guntersville. It's one of those tournaments where I just gotta shrug it off and get back out there. It really super motivated me to get back on Guntersville and learn that lake more, because Guntersville has always been a fishery that, for whatever reason, if I'm not understanding what is going on, I really don't understand what's going on, and I don't do well. I've had plenty of really bad events out there, and I've also had a handful of good ones. So I'm not sure where that disconnect is on Guntersville, but I'm going to figure it out, because that's what I do. Is if I stumble, man, I come back and really rally. I've done it pretty much on every fishery that I've done poor at. I've come back and I've killed it. So whether that'll be the next tournament or 10 tournaments down the line on Guntersville, I don't know, but we're definitely going to figure out the secrets to Gville. But anyways, guys, thank you for all the support. That is what happened at the Toyota Series Championship. It's a bad tournament, but no biggie. We're going to get back after it. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water.